Hello everyone, back tuning into the fifth winter 2018-19 update from GavsWeatherVids.com. So done 4 updates so far. Pretty interesting updates they've been as well. The first 2 or 3 updates were specifically focusing on hot summers and dry summers and winters that followed them. And then last week we did an ocean special in terms of the Atlantic Ocean. This week the 5th update is going to be a solar cycle special. So this video will contain all of the regular features that we look at, but we're specifically focusing on the solar cycles. We're getting very close to solar minimum, even if we're not at solar minimum. I think we probably are at solar minimum, but we're very close to solar minimum. We've got weak levels of solar activity. We're going to see what that could mean for the winter. Got a little bit of a problem though, because we may be like a year or so from true solar minimum, or this may be the solar minimum winter, and so that means we've got 2 data sets that we've got to look at, and so maybe here for a little while. It's going to be quite an extended video, so you can't watch it all in one go. Don't worry, this video will be kept at GavsWeatherVids indefinitely. I'll be placing it on the winter updates page this evening. There'll be an extensive written report that goes with it as well. Just going over everything we talk about in the video. So you can't watch the video in one go. You'll be able to watch it whenever you want on demand at website. And also you'll be able to read the written summary for the video as well. As I said, going to be a long one, so get yourself a cup of chair, get yourself a cup of tea, and, well, I normally say get some biscuits, but I've been thinking that maybe I should recommend some healthier food, so maybe get yourself a couple of bananas, I don't know, a little bit of fruit to go with your cup of tea. Whatever you fancy, so just enjoy the video, and thanks so much for tuning in on this Sunday morning. Just say that the actual winter forecast, all these updates are building up to the winter forecast, of course. The actual winter forecast from GavsWeatherVids will be released on Sunday, the 2nd of December. The only other thing I'm going to say is a big thank you to James Acrill for getting all of the analogues and the solar information together for this video. So a lot of the information you see in this video has been sent to me via James, and so as ever, big thank you to the analogues guru and the solar specialist, Mr. James Acrill, for all of his help and input for this video. And I think that's pretty much covers everything. So without further ado, let's get on with the 5th 2018-19 update. We're going to begin by having a look at the oceans. So this is how the oceans were looking last week when we did the 4th update. We've got 3 areas of interest specifically. We've got the ENSO region just there. We've got the Northern Pacific up here. And we've got the Atlantic Ocean over there. So that's how the oceans were looking last week when we did the 4th winter update. Let's have a look at the very latest. These charts from NOAA, of course. So this is from Thursday, 27th of September. Let's deal with the ENSO region first of all. So that's how the ENSO region is looking right now. Let's go back and have a look last week. There hasn't been a huge amount of change in the ENSO region, but I think the central part of the equatorial Pacific has warmed a little bit. So we have had a little bit of warming. We've had some warming over here in the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. We've also warmed things up through the central part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. Now, we're not talking about a classic El Nino signature, but we are just about possibly scraping to El Nino threshold there in terms of the central, particularly central equatorial Pacific Ocean. Still quite an unusual situation because it's still pretty cold down here off the coast of Chile, and that's not an area that you really associate with being cold when you've got an El Nino taking place. But I think a little bit of warming has taken place in the equatorial Pacific Ocean compared to last week. Further north in the Northern Pacific, that situation last week, this situation now very little change. It remains substantially warmer than average now in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. So really quite warm up there. And then over in the Atlantic, again, that situation last week. This is the situation now in the Northern Atlantic Ocean. Again, very little change. So we've kept this colder than average area sea surface temperature anomalies here to the south of Greenland. Then we've got this warmer area just there from sort of the east coast of America, stretching out into the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, and then down in the tropics, so close to average really with the sea surface temperature anomalies in the tropical Atlantic. It's quite an unusual profile, what we've got happening in the North Atlantic at the moment. If you want to know what that could mean, then do check out the fourth update, because we did manage to find 2 or 3 years that look like close-ish matches to the current situation. 1990 was one of them, and then we found a few going further back. But it is a very unusual sea surface temperature anomaly that we've got there. In terms of the Norwegian Sea, that was situation in the Norwegian Sea last week. Up here, let's have a look at the situation now. So things are beginning to cool down a little bit in the Norwegian Sea. We did start off with a substantially warmer than average sea surface temperature anomaly up here. Things are just at the moment beginning to cool down a little bit. Maybe the Norwegian Sea won't be as warm as it was for winter 2017-18. We'll have to wait to see on that. As far as the SOI is concerned, the Southern Oscillation Index, this is an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the southern Pacific Ocean. So it's looking at the pressures, the air pressures between Darwin in northern Australia and Tahiti in the South Pacific. And when the SOI is negative, it tells you that the atmosphere is in an El Nino type setup. When the SOI is positive, you're in a La Nina type setup in the Southern Ocean. To get a real El Nino going, you need to have the ocean coupling up with the atmosphere. You need to get them both getting into sync. When that happens, you can drive up the El Nino. Let's scroll down and have a look at the latest daily return. So we'll go down, let's go down to kind of like the early part of September. So you'll see in the early part of September, this is 7th September, for example, 6th of September, 5th of September, 9th of September, 8th of September. You'll see very negative numbers there. Minus 21.39, minus 30.78, minus 32.27, and minus 26.03. Those are proper El Nino returns in terms of the atmospheric setup. The SOI is very negative there. That tells you that the atmosphere is well and truly in El Nino type threshold. However, we went into the middle part of September, and actually the SOI went positive. So on the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, and the 17th, we see positivity of the SOI. However, more recently, we started to go very negative once again. So we go up to 21st of September, for example, we're down to minus 14. 22nd of September, down to minus 25. 23rd of September, down to minus 27. And we've kept this negativity going through into the final days of September. So the very latest number that we have is for 29th of September at minus 9.51. If I take you up here to this graph, you can see that overall the SOI is trending more and more negative now. So it's going down to kind of for September, 29th of September, it's going down kind of like to a level of minus 7, minus 8 in terms of the 30-day average. So trending down with the SOI. The SOI looks like it's entering a more negative phase, and that probably explains why the sea surface temperature have warmed a little bit in the central part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. This is from tropicaltidbits.com, and it shows you the temperature anomaly, sea surface temperature anomaly on a daily basis of going into the region 3.4 part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, kind of like the middle of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. You can see that over the past few days, we have actually lifted the sea surface temperature anomalies up quite a bit, actually. So back here around the middle of September, the sea surface temperature anomalies were only kind of like at a little bit above average, basically at ENSO neutral. But just in the past couple of weeks, we have seen quite a substantial warming, to be honest, going up above half a degree above average. Now, to get an El Nino designated, we've got to be at half a degree or more above average with the sea surface temperature anomalies in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, the central part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, and over 5 tri-monthly periods. We have actually reached El Nino threshold for the first time with this event, going above half a degree above average. I mean, we're still talking about a very weak El Nino. Even if we do manage to get to El Nino thresholds over the required 5 tri-monthly periods, which is going to be a big ask because we're very late on now in the year, but we may do it. But even if we do it, it's only going to be a very weak El Nino event. But there we go. We have seen warming, most definitely, of the central part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean in the past week or two. We'll keep an eye on that, of course, over the remainder of the winter updates. I suspect the ENSO analogues will be coming late on this year. Probably won't be seeing those until November, but we shall see. Just bring an update with the QBO. There hasn't been any more information on that, but I haven't included it in the videos the past couple of weeks. Someone was asking me about the QBO. So there's no point sort of including it every week because there's no change at the moment. We'll get our next QBO number, which will be placed just here. This is from NOAA, by the way. It'll be placed just there, the next quasi-biennial oscillation number. For next week's update. So you'll see how September comes out in terms of the QBO when we do next week's 6th winter update. What happened last month in August is that we saw the easterly QBO weakening. So we're still in easterly QBO condition. Last month was at minus 20.41. That's down from minus 28.45 in June, minus 29.10 in July. Very, very strong easterly QBO we've been in through this summer. August, though, saw a weakening of the easterly QBO, although still well and truly in easterly QBO threshold in the layer of the atmosphere where the troposphere, where weather is taking place. I suspect when September's number updates just there, it should still be negative, probably quite negative, actually. But I suspect it won't be as negative as it was in August, if you see what I mean. So we're going to gradually lift the easterly QBO towards kind of like neutral type condition by the time you get through to November, I would have thought. And actually, November and December might go very slightly positive. We may, before the end of the year, get a positive number, a westerly QBO number turning up. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean we will be in a westerly QBO because it takes a while for that to propagate down into the atmosphere and really start to take effect on the atmosphere. So the early part of this winter, anyway, should be easterly QBO. The second half of winter may well transition into a westerly QBO. So you'll hear more about that next week. Latest in terms of the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season is looking like this. This is the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season from Wikipedia, and the latest numbers are looking like that. So we have 13 total depressions, 12 total storms, 5 hurricanes, and just 1 major Category 3 or above hurricane. So, quite an unusual season this. In terms of depressions and storms, this has actually turned out to be a little bit more of a livelier season than we was probably anticipating at the start of the summer. We always thought it was going to be quite a quiet hurricane season, partly due to developing El Nino, partly due to dust coming out of Africa, partly due to the sea surface temperature anomalies in the tropical Atlantic being a little bit cooler than average. So putting it all together, we always expect this to be quite a fairly quiet hurricane season in the Atlantic. And I think in terms of tropical storms and depressions, it probably turned out to be a little bit more active than we expected. But in terms of hurricanes, it's actually turned out to be quite a fairly quiet season. We've only had 5 hurricanes in total so far, and only had 1 major hurricane as well. So it's been a funny sort of hurricane season, this one, with quite a bit of activity, but really struggling to develop into hurricanes, major hurricanes. Now, we've still got October to go, and in fact we've still got November. You can get hurricanes in November, so we're probably about we're over halfway through now, but still got a little way to go, and we'll see how that transpires and develops over the rest of the season. But up to now, it has been quite a strange hurricane season, I think. Right, let's have a look at the Siberian snow cover next. So this is how Siberian snow cover was looking when we did the video last week, when we did the 4th update. So this is from the 21st of September. It's from the National Ice Centre, which is part of NOAA. You can see we didn't have all that much snow, actually. We had a few patches over here in the extreme eastern portion of Siberia. By the way, the Arctic refreeze is underway now. This yellow area is Arctic sea ice. That's going to start expanding from now onwards. So we are beginning to move upwards. We reached our minimum level of Arctic sea ice loss last week, so we won't be looking at that again. Right, back to Siberian snow cover, and we can see that last week when we did the 4th update, we did have some snow patches here in the eastern part of Siberia. Let's have a look at the latest. This is it. So we have increased snow a little bit from last week. Yes, that situation last week. This is the latest as of the 28th of September. I'll just try and give you a refresh of the page and see if the latest up for Saturday. So that went a little bit wrong, didn't it? They've changed the security settings at the National Ice Centre. So if you go to this page, you'll be confronted by a not secure notice. It's due to their certificate. They've gone to HTTPS, but they haven't got a certificate that is recognised by kind of like Google Chrome. So you'll get a not secure notice, but the website is secure. It's part of NOAA, so you just click through that, and you can still go to the website to access these charts if you want. Right, come back to Siberian snow cover. So it hasn't updated for Saturday. This is the this situation on Friday. We did have some Siberian snow cover here in the eastern part, a little bit more than we saw last week. But again, we're talking about rather small levels of snow cover. And if I show you the situation at this point last year, this is from the 29th of September last year, you'll notice there was a lot more snow cover actually at this point last year. So it looks like we're having a bit of a struggle to get the snow cover season going across Siberia. Although, from memory, I think this was a bit of a record breaker, what was happening at this point last year. I don't think there were many other years that had that much snow across eastern Siberia by the end of September. So that's probably a bit of an outlier, and I suppose what we see this year for 2018 is probably more in line, actually, with what you would expect at the end of September. We're going to start focusing on this much more from next week's update, actually, because it's through October that this is a critical, or one of the critical factors. So how quickly that snow cover spreads across Siberia and Russia will be interesting to see. Eventually, this whole area will fill up with snow, but how quickly it happens through October and how quickly we pull snow cover down into Scandinavia as well will be something that we'll be focusing on much more in depth, I think, when we get through to next week's update and then the rest of the updates during October. But again, we are well down now on Siberian snow cover compared to this time last year. Right, the rest of the video is going to focus on solar activity. So this is the latest in terms of a solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net. We've got a completely spotless solar disk. There's no sunspots whatsoever on the solar disk. So obviously solar activity is at very low levels and is expected to remain at very low levels for the next 3 days. Solarham is reporting that. This is the GavsWeatherVids 5th winter update solar activity tracker, updated by James as of the 29th of September. And look at this, the trend lines are really dipping down once again. I won't say they're crashing because they're already at a very low level, but certainly the trend lines have moved downwards. So the orange line here is depicting each day's the orange line is depicting each day's sunspots, if you like. We've got the dates along the side. We go right way back to last autumn with this. So the orange line here depicts each day's sunspots. You can see overall we do get these sunspots appearing, spiking up with the orange line, whilst the trend generally is inching its way downwards. Through the summer, we went through a very, very low level of solar activity. I think that's when we entered into solar minimum, really, during this summer. And so you can see that in a run of about a month, actually around 4 weeks I think it was, there was barely a sunspot to be seen, just that little one just there. But really from here and going through to around there, which is kind of like late June through to early August, there was barely any sunspots at all. We did get a little bit of a burst of sunspots then through the course of August. That just lifted the trend lines, indicated by the thick green and the thick red lines, lifted those up just a little bit. But you can see that now those trend lines are moving down. So I've had around 2 weeks of near spotless conditions, starting around the middle of September and going through to where we are right now at the end of September. No sunspots for the past 2 weeks, or barely any anyway. And that has caused the trend lines, the thick green and the thick red lines, to start moving downwards. So you can see we are at such a low level of solar activity now. We are very, very close to solar minimum. This winter will either be one winter from solar minimum, or it will be the true solar minimum winter, and we won't know until we have gone past this winter whether it has been. This is how solar cycle 24 is looking overall. So you can see that again, been a very strange solar cycle, with very, very slow lift up in solar activity, going up to the double peak of the solar maximum, the first solar maximum occurring in 2011, the second solar maximum occurring at the start of 2014. Since when we've been trending down into solar minimum, not a linear process, so we get a spike downwards or a drop downwards like that, and then we lift it up. We get a drop down, then we lift it up, we drop down, then lift up, and so on until we get to where we are right now. Again, very, very low levels of solar activity that we're seeing right now. So if I get rid of those lines, you can see that the latest for August, that orange spot just there is August sunspot number. You can see we're kind of like on a par with where we was in terms of this solar cycle, where it was at the beginning of the solar cycle in 2009. So at a really, really low level of solar and sunspot activity. If we compare this solar cycle to the last solar cycle, again, this is where we are, or where we was in August. So comparing it to where we would have been at this point in solar cycle number 23, we're kind of like around here, 2007 levels. Solar minimum of solar cycle 23 occurred in 2008. You can see that just there, 0809. So again, we're very, very close to solar minimum. If we're not quite there yet, we are very, very close to it. We're kind of like where we was in 2007 at the moment, at those sort of levels. This is how solar cycle 24 compares to all solar cycles going back to solar cycle number 1. So each one of these coloured lines here indicates an individual solar cycle. Again, we go back to number 1 up there and down to number 24 just there. The red line is solar cycle number 24. You can see it's right down here at the bottom, as it has been throughout most of these, but throughout most of this solar cycle, we've been trending at the bottom of the solar cycle. So we're with the weakest solar cycles, if you like. That's where we start. That's where we was with solar maximum. Again, look how much further the solar maximum was compared to most of these, how much weaker, how much lower the solar maximum was compared to most of these other solar cycles. You just go to show you how unusual solar cycle number 24 has been. Where we are right now compared to all those other solar cycles is they're right at the very bottom, at the very weakest level of those other solar cycles, really. So compared to the weakest solar cycles, again, this is where we are right now. So actually, again, the red line is solar cycle number 24, the current solar cycle. We've got number 5, number 6, number 12, number 14, number 16, number 24. This is here. And actually, you can see that the red line, it really is down there with the very weakest of the solar cycles now as we're entering into solar minimum. So we have talked about this a lot in the videos over the years. This has been one of the weakest solar cycles on record, not quite at the Dalton minimum level of solar cycles number 5 and 6, but it has been one of the weakest solar cycles. It continues to be, even as we're edging ever closer to solar minimum, it continues to be one of the weakest solar cycles. You'll notice that a lot of these solar cycles go to true solar minimum around that sort of area. So that just tells us we may have a little way to go yet, and it might be that next winter 2019-20 is actually the true solar minimum winter for this solar cycle. And then this is comparing solar cycle number 12 to number 24. So solar cycle number 12 was the solar cycle that occurred from 1877 through to 1890. These two solar cycles have had a connection with one another as we've gone through them. You see that the way we went into solar maximum, lifted up from solar minimum into solar maximum, with these two solar cycles has been very similar. And then the way we've come out of solar maximum and gone into solar minimum has been very similar as well. Where we are right now, the orange is depicting solar cycle 24 and green solar cycle 12. Where we are right now, again, we're at a very low level. We're going into solar minimum rapidly, and you can see we're basically on a par with where we was at this point in solar cycle number 12. Solar cycle number 12 had a little bit longer to run. What you do find with these weak solar cycles, they tend to be more extended. They tend to go on a little bit longer compared to the more active solar cycles. So some of the more active solar cycles can only be like 10 or 11 years, whereas these weaker solar cycles, they can go on kind of like 11, 12 years. So it maybe does show, if we carry on along a par with number 12, solar cycle number 12, it possibly does show that next winter 2019-20 might be the true solar minimum winter of this solar cycle. Talked about this in the video a couple of weeks ago. I think it was for the second update, so I won't go over that again. If you want to know what this chart is showing in detail, then have a look at the second winter update. Basically, it's comparing the winters of the two solar cycles. Throughout the early part of the solar cycle, number 24, current solar cycle, the winters were running in trend very close to solar cycle number 12. We broke that through the middle part, this part of the of solar cycle number 24. We broke that trend, but last winter actually went back onto trend. We had a cooler or a colder than average winter, albeit only slightly compared to the rolling 30-year mean. We had a slightly colder than average winter, going back to trend with its counterpart in solar cycle number 12, which was 1887. 1888. This is the winter that we're interested in now. It was basically close to average, really, but ever so slightly colder than average in solar cycle number 12, 1888, 1889. Will we go colder than average with solar cycle, the winter of solar cycle 24, which of course is going to be 2018-19? We will find out very, very shortly. Just a few weeks, in fact. Right, so at that point, I'm going to pause the video. And when we come back, we're going to go through some analogues, and we're going to have a look and see what the solar minimum winters can mean for this winter, what it might mean. So I'm going to pause the video just there, and we'll be back very, very shortly. And yeah, we'll go through those analogues for the solar minimum winters. So see you around 2 minutes. Get yourself a cup of tea and, well, whatever you want to nibble. And I'll see you in a moment. Okay, we're back. We're going to resume with the fifth winter 2018-19 update. So we're talking about the solar cycle number 24, when we left off, when we paused the video. And we're heading into solar minimum very rapidly now. We've established that from our solar trackers and other information. This winter will either be 1 year away from solar minimum, or it will be the solar minimum winter. And we won't know until we have passed solar minimum, until we've gone into the next solar cycle, solar cycle number 25. We won't know when solar minimum has been reached. So it always creates a bit of a problem, really, when you're doing these updates, because it means we've got two data sets we've got to look at. The first data set we've got to look at is for the winters that are kind of like one winter prior to solar minimum, and then the second data set we've got to look at is the true solar minimum winter. So we're going to start off by having a look at the winters that were kind of like one winter before solar minimum, and then we'll have a look at the solar minimum winters after that. So we're going to begin by having a look at solar cycle number 10. This is how the winter of 1865-1866 looks. It occurs 1 year prior to the solar minimum of solar cycle number 10. And this one had an area of above average heights to the east and to the southeast of the country, with below average heights out to the west and to the northwest as well, which leaves us doing something a little bit like that with the flow and with the jet stream. So a relatively mild winter, this one, and fairly Atlantic driven as well. The next winter is 1877-1878. This is the winter that was 1 year prior to the solar minimum, from 1 year prior to solar minimum as solar cycle number 11. This one has a blocking signature. It has a blocking signature to the west of the UK and also to the north as well. Not a particularly cold winter because there is quite an Atlantic influence. So I suppose it probably did have cold snaps, but the winter of 1878 isn't remembered as a desperately cold winter. The next winter is from actually solar cycle number 12. It's 1888-1889. This is a winter that occurs 1 year prior to the solar minimum winter of solar cycle number 12. And this one, it has above average heights out to the west of the UK, below average heights to the north and to the south. So again, trying to be a cold winter. I suppose there was some cold weather at times. It was a slightly colder than average winter, but not a true blocking signal in evidence there. The next winter is from solar cycle number 13, occurring 1 year prior to the solar minimum of solar cycle number 13. It's 1900-1901. And this one has below average heights to the south and also to the east of the country, and a blocking signature around Greenland. So this one looks like it's a bit of a colder pattern, certainly in terms of the blocking. It's a colder pattern. The jet stream is on a more southerly track down here, and this blocking could well be pushing cold air out of the North Pole as well. The next winter is from solar cycle number 14. It's 1912-1913. Very unsettled winter, this one. Below average heights out to west, really Atlantic driven, with high pressure down to the south. So you'll notice at the moment we aren't, perhaps surprisingly, we aren't really trending towards very cold winters here, with these winters occurring 1 year prior to solar minimum. The next winter is solar cycle number 15. It's 1922-1923. Again, unsettled winter, below average heights over to the west of the country, but not a particularly cold winter. We bring the winds in from a westerly direction with this one. We're up to solar cycle number 16. This is the winter of 1932-1933. So again, we've got below average heights down to the south. We do have a blocking signal up here over Scandinavia. I think this was a rather colder winter in 1932-1933 and also quite dry. Solar cycle number 17, 1 year prior to solar minimum, is 1942-1943. And again, we find that we have the below average heights up to the north, the above average heights down to the south. Not a particularly cold winter signal, the wind coming in from a west or southwesterly direction. The next winter is 1952-1953. It's occurring 1 year prior to solar minimum in solar cycle number 18. And this one has the below average heights, change of colour, it has below average heights down to the south. In 52-53 with above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. That's perhaps a very common theme with some of these winters, a mid-Atlantic ridge, which would allow some colder conditions to be coming down from the north. But again, it's not a true blocking pattern. It's not a truly cold winter in 52-53. The next winter is 63-64, occurring in solar cycle number 19. So this is just a quiet, dry winter. Really has above average heights, a little bit to the north of the UK, but it's not remembered as a particularly cold winter in 63-64. The winter before that, 62-63, was a very cold winter. This one isn't remembered as being all that cold. It is quite a dry winter. We're up to solar cycle number 20, and it's 74-75. This is a very dry but mild winter. It has above average heights to the south and below average heights up to the north, and we bring up those southwest winds. So it's a dry but also very mild winter in 74-75. This one's a little bit more interesting. It's 85-86. This is 1 year prior to the solar minimum of solar cycle number 21. It has a blocking signal around Greenland, and it has below average heights to the south of the country, and we pull in the wind more from an east or northeasterly direction. Very cold February in 1986, but before that, cold was on and off. We had a pretty cold November in 1985. There were cold snaps at the end. There's a cold snap at the end of December after Christmas, and then again cold snaps through particularly the early part of January 1986, and then it really locked in to a really cold pattern in February. And then we've got 95-96 turning up 1 year prior to the solar minimum of solar cycle number 22. So this one, when it's an easterly type winter, it has a strong area of above average heights to the north of the country. It has below average heights to the south, and the wind comes in from an easterly, very easterly winter in 95-96. So now they're starting to get a little bit more interesting. But many of these winters actually are not guaranteed, interestingly, to be giving us cold patterns. And then finally, we've got the last solar cycle, number 23, the winter occurring 1 year before solar minimum of solar cycle number 23 was 2007-2008. And it's an Atlantic-driven winter, this one with below average heights to the north, above average heights to the south, bringing up those southwesterly winds. So again, quite a dry pattern, but a pretty mild winter for 07-08. If we put all those together, this is how the Decembers come out 1 year prior to solar minimum. So we find that we have below average height, or 1 winter prior to solar minimum, we have below average heights out to the north and the west of the country on average in the Decembers, with above average heights to the south. So it's not a particularly cold pattern, interestingly. It's generally quite a mildish sort of pattern, and reasonably dry as well. I'm sure this is quite a big surprise to most of you watching. Now, the Januaries do get a little bit more interesting from a cold perspective. So 1 year prior to solar minimum, this is how we come out with the Januaries, with a blocking signature for Scandinavia, and it looks like we have some below average heights to the south. So that's a little bit more interesting than the Januaries from a cold perspective. Again, there are going to be deviations within these Januaries, of course, but overall, possibly the Januaries do just about favour a colder signal, and that continues to the Februaries as well, when we get above average heights appearing around Greenland and Iceland, with below average heights to the south, and the winds tend to be coming from the east or northeasterly direction. And then the Marches also look quite interesting. They tend to have above average heights to the north and the northeast of the country, with below average heights down to the south. The way that lines up, you could either get cold easterlies or probably not overly cold sort of south-southeasterly, but it is quite a strong blocking signal. So as we go along, it looks like the risk of cold block conditions actually grows as the winters goes along, but probably favouring milder Decembers. Combining all of that, this is how the winters themselves come out, and we do get a blocking signature with high pressure generally over and centred a little bit to the east of the country, below average heights down to the south. So they do look like they're fairly dry winters, these. And again, the Decembers look quite mild, and then perhaps getting a little bit colder as we go further on. Now, one thing our good friend Terry Scully has pointed out to us is that there is a difference between solar cycles that are even-numbered solar cycles and solar cycles that are odd-numbered solar cycles. So we're in an even-numbered solar cycle at the moment, solar cycle number 24. 24 is an even number, of course. So looking, just isolating out through those winters, just isolating out the winters that are occurring in even numbered solar cycles, like solar cycle number 24. This is how the Decembers come out. Again, we find that we have this above average heights area across central parts of Europe, below average heights up to the north, and we pull those winds up from a southerly direction. The Januaries with these even-numbered solar cycles have a stronger blocking signal over Scandinavia, though. So, again, possibly favouring something really quite cold and wintry for the Januaries. There is a lot of below-average heights, though, out to the west of the country, so it's a complicated pattern. Could be a battleground type pattern, but definitely a stronger signal that the Januaries have high pressure over Scandinavia with those even numbered solar cycles. The Februaries look like that, with above average heights out to the west, below average heights to the east of the country, pulling down those cold northeasterly winds. The Marches, again, it's a very similar signal for the Marches, with below average heights to the south and the blocking signal up to the north, with those even numbered solar cycle Marches. The winters themselves with these even numbered solar cycles look like that. It does favour a blocking signal over Scandinavia with below average heights to the south of the country. So again, they're quite dry winters and maybe a little bit more favoured to be colder compared to the all years combined. If we just look at odd-numbered solar cycles, this is how they come out. So this is kind of like looking at solar cycle number 23, solar cycle number 21, solar cycle 19, if you like. So compared to the even-numbered all winters combined chart, the odd-numbered all winters combined chart for the solar cycles does have a slightly better positioned blocking feature around Greenland and Iceland, and does favour, I think, slightly favours a colder winter outcome with the odd-numbered solar cycle winters compared to the even-numbered solar cycle winters. So quite interesting how that comes out. And then, of course, we've got to look at the true solar minimum winters. These are probably going to be more relevant for next year, actually, when we do the updates for 2019-20. I think next year will be the true solar minimum winter, but it may happen early, so it is possible that this winter, 18-19, will be the true solar minimum winter. Now, some of these winters are occurring a little bit before solar minimum, some of them might be occurring a little bit after solar minimum, but these are the closest winters to solar minimum. So we start off with this one, 1866-1867, solar minimum winter, and it has above average heights to the south, with below average heights up to the north, and it's a mild Atlantic westerly winter. Then we go on to our next solar minimum winter, which is 1878-1879. This one has tremendous amounts of blocking around Greenland, and it has this area of below average heights to the south, and it pulls in those bitterly cold east or northeasterly winds. That's a severely cold winter in 1878-1879, and it is a true solar minimum winter. Then we've got 1888-1889. This, again, a solar minimum winter, has below average heights to the west, and it has above average heights across Scandinavia. Quite a cold winter in 1889-1890. Quite a cold winter, that one. Then we go through to the solar minimum winter of 1901-1902. This looks like a cold winter. It has a blocking signature to the south of Greenland. It has below average heights to the south and to the east of the country. And we pull down those cold northeast winds. These ones are starting to look a little bit more conducive to a colder outcome, I have to say. This is the solar minimum winter of 1913-1914, with below average heights close to the country, no real blocking signal, quite an unsettled and quite a mild winter, that one. 1923-1924 looks like this. So it has above average heights to the north of the country, with below average heights to the south. I don't think it's remembered as a particularly cold winter. Actually, I think for the UK it was a relatively mildish winter in 1924, but central parts of Europe, I think, had a very cold winter. 1933-1934 is our next solar minimum winter. This is a cold winter. It has above average heights centred just a little bit to the north of the country, and we're bringing in those cold easterly winds in 33-34. 43-44 is the next solar minimum winter, with above average heights just out to west of the country, and we pull down those cold northerly winds. So actually wasn't a particularly cold winter because there is an Atlantic influence going on there. The wind's kind of like more west-northwesterly. Quite a dry winter, not overly cold. The next winter is 53-54. This is another cold winter. It has above average heights, particularly to the northeast over Scandinavia, with below average heights down to the south. We bring in those cold east or northeasterly winds. It was January and February of 1954 that got cold then. Then we go through to 64-65. The next solar minimum winter is another pretty cold one, with above average heights to the north and the northwest, below average heights to the southeast, again favouring northerly or northeasterly winds. There was a very cold March, I think, in 1965. 1975-1976 looks like that. It's a mild and dry winter with an area of above average heights close to the country. So again, we don't guarantee cold conditions with these winters, quite evidently, but I think the true solar minimum winters do possibly favour a colder outcome. 86-87 turns up next, with above average heights to the north, below average heights over to the east of the country, and of course we get that severe January in 1987. 96-97 looks like that. It's a dry winter overall, with above average heights close to the country. Quite an interesting winter because it's cold through December into early January, and then it gets very mild by the time you get through to February 1997. And then the final solar minimum winter is 2008-2009. This one has above average heights to the north and northeast, which is a little bit of a recurring theme with these winters. I think below average heights to the south, and we favour bringing in those easterly winds. I'm sure you remember 08-09 very well. It was the first of the cluster of cold winters, starting with 2008-9 and ending with 2012-13. Putting all those solar minimum winters together, this is how the Decembers come out. So a little bit better, definitely, for the Decembers from a cold perspective. compared to the Decembers 1 year prior to solar minimum, because you have the above average heights to the west of us and below average heights to the south. Now, there is an Atlantic influence with that, but definitely you have a greater chance of bringing down cold air from the north with the true solar minimum Decembers. But look at the Januaries. The Januaries favour a really big blocking feature to be centred around Greenland and Iceland, with below average heights then to the south of the country, and that's a proper cold signal actually for those Januaries. And the Februaries too show quite a cold signature as well, with the above average heights to the northwest of the country, below average heights to the south. Again, you will favour bringing in those cold easterly winds. The Marches, well, the blocking signal reduces. It's still there to some degree in the Marches, but a lot weaker. It looks like the Marches probably favour turning a little bit milder, but also quite unsettled, with below average heights more centred towards the country. As far as the winters themselves are concerned, I think they do look a little bit better from a cold perspective when it's true solar minimum. So you have the above average heights to the west of the country, below average heights to the south, and I think you do generally favour bringing in the winds from a north or northeasterly direction. Again, just looking at even numbered solar cycles, and this is how we look for those solar cycles, like solar cycle 22, like solar cycle 20, solar cycle 18, and so on. We see that for the even numbered solar cycles in December, we favour the above average heights to be just to the west of the country, with the below average heights to the south. The winds coming in they can come in from an easterly direction, but there would also be an Atlantic influence, because the above average heights is actually centred out to the west of the country. However, they do look a little bit better in terms of a cold perspective when you're at solar minimum. The Januaries look like that. So again, we have the above average heights close to the country. We do favour drier winters, I think, with these winters, by the way. So the temperatures are a little bit of a mixed bag. Generally, I think they favour a cold outcome, but particularly favouring, quite unusually, particularly favouring dry winters. The Januaries with these even-numbered solar cycles have above-average heights to the north and the west of the country. The Februaries look like that, and possibly they just favour dry and mild, with above-average heights across Central Europe, below-average heights up around Greenland, and generally pulling in the wind from a southeasterly direction. So the Februaries possibly favour dry and mild with these even-numbered solar cycles. Then the Marches look really unsettled, with below-average heights basically over to the west of the country. A strong Atlantic-driven pattern as well in the Marches. The overall winters with these even-numbered solar cycles look like that, and they do favour a dry winter with high pressure centred over the top of the country when you're at true solar minimum. Again, not all that much of a blocking signal though, perhaps quite surprisingly. We see below average heights up to the north, so the blocking signal is actually relatively weak. If we look at the odd numbered solar cycle winters, it's actually a much better signal for a cold outcome. So this is looking at winters like solar minimum winters like solar cycle number 23, solar cycle number 21, solar cycle 19, solar cycle 17, and so on. And we do see that there's a stronger blocking signal with those odd numbered winters to be to the north and to the west, with the below average heights to the southeast, the wind coming in from a northeasterly direction. So what do we take away from that? It is a bit of a mixed bag, and I think what we can take away is that the solar cycle that we're in, being an even-numbered solar cycle, possibly doesn't favour a cold outcome as much as if we was in an odd-numbered solar cycle. So that's just something we're going to have to work with, I think. But what we can see is that you have a better chance of a cold winter if you're at solar minimum compared to being a year before solar minimum. I think we're at a year before solar minimum. So the solar stuff, I'm sure this is a bit of a surprise to a lot of you watching. We will be expecting, because we're close to solar minimum, it will virtually guarantee a cold winter. But as I always explain, there is no guarantees in the weather. There's never a guarantee as far as the weather is concerned. And I think what we can say is that if you're 1 year before solar minimum, you have a slightly reduced risk of a cold winter compared to if you are at solar minimum. And also, the risk of a cold winter is reduced by being in an even numbered solar cycle compared to an odd numbered solar cycle. Such as the last one, solar cycle number 23. Now, having said all of that, we did see within both packages, and particularly, I think, with the more modern winters, to be honest, that there is a signal for things to be cold. So it certainly doesn't rule out the chance of a cold winter. Don't be too disappointed if you want a cold winter with this. But it does prove that just because we are close to or at solar minimum, it is not a guarantee that we're going to get a cold winter. And other factors will be important. And just to add on to this, the winters... and these will become more important in winter updates that we're going to do in the next 2 or 3 years. But the winters just after solar minimum, so like the first winters of the solar cycles, if you like, the first 2 or 3 winters of the solar cycles, those ones have a greater chance of being cold. I'll let you know that now. So the early winters of solar cycle number 25, and probably because there's a time lag between solar minimum happening and the effect that it has on the atmosphere, those winters early on in solar cycle 25 will have a greater chance of being colder. Right, 54 minutes, so it actually hasn't gone on quite as long as I had expected, this one. Hope you found it interesting and informative. I know that we didn't include the stratospheric analysis from Weather is Cool this week. I decided to leave that out because I had so much to talk about. That will be back next week, so if you want to know about the forecast for the stratosphere at 10 HPA, which we've been including in the winter updates just this year, then you'll be able to be brought up to date with that next week for the 6th winter update. But at 55 minutes, a little bit shorter than I was expecting. I thought this would probably run over an hour, but at 55 minutes, that's it for the 5th winter 2018-19 update. Hope you found it interesting and informative. And later on today, this video will be placed on the winter updates page. There'll be an extensive written report going over everything that we discussed in the video as well, so you can watch the video on demand when you would like to. You can have a read of that written report as well. But it just gone 55 minutes or 56 minutes. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.